Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt once again from Divination Counseling Service. Today, I want to do a little lecture on relationships. So I want to talk about what I believe is one of the very prominent questions that's been asked to me as an astrologer and as a reader, but particularly as an astrologer because there's so many things that we can look at to determine relationships in astrology. So, with that said, we're going to look at all the factors involved in looking at somebody's relationships. And I'm talking about the fifth house of love affairs, the seventh house of partnerships. I'm talking about how Cupido Chronos, that midpoint, equals marriage. I'm going to talk to you about Hera and Juno, about Venus. And we're going to look at both synastry in charts and composite. And what is the difference when you're looking at these charts? What makes a composite chart? What makes a synastry chart? So I have a little bit of visuals to show you. And hopefully I'm going to be able to explain how these work. Okay, so I want to start off by first of all thanking you for watching the video. I also want to thank all of my subscribers who've been helping me to build this channel. Thank you so much. I know we're a small channel because it's educational, so I'm not expecting big things, but I'm a little surprised that we do as well as we do. So thank you so much, guys, for all of your support. And if you're not a subscriber, I hope you consider becoming one. And if you would, like, share, comment. I'd love to hear from you. And the likes help the channel. So if you would, that would be great. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, I want to look at relationships as they affect an individual. So I'm not going to start with combining charts, composite or synastry. I'll get to that. I think that it's really important that if you're studying astrology, and you're relatively young, I was when I began, very young, that you begin to learn these things and you can understand these things about yourself. Okay? So before I get there, I just want to talk about some of the things we're going to be looking at in this diagram I'm going to throw up. When you're talking about relationships, we can start with 3 asteroids, 1 planet, and a couple of trans-Neptunians well placed. Okay? And I'll explain that. Hera, which is one of the asteroids, which is Juno, but the Greek version, I guess one is, one language, one is another language, but we actually have 2 separate asteroids in every chart that talks to us about our partnerships and one-on-one relationships. So at this point, I'm not necessarily going to divide up these relationships. Some will be platonic, some will be romantic, some will be for business. All are relevant and all can be read through all of the techniques I'm going to teach you today. Okay? So starting off with just looking at where your Hera might be or where your Juno might be. That's critical, depending on what house these 2 asteroids fall in, can tell you a little bit about your one-on-one relationships. And we'd go through the houses, okay? And I think that people that have it very close to the ascendant, and we'll start with them, or like say on their sun, have Juno or Hera, because they really do read the same. Then these are people that do everything with other people. They don't do things alone. Sometimes depending on where they're, let me think about this. The asteroids that relate to enabling. Ganymede. Okay. Ganymede is one of, but so is oh, I can see it right. Hebe. I can hardly. I love when I'm doing these things. All these words that I work with every day just slip my mind. Okay, they talk about enabling. So if you have somebody with a really strong Juno, it sits on their sun, but you will also see some of the enabling factors with it. Then those are people that have to be very careful because partnerships are either their way of enabling themselves or it's about enabling other people. And that's something to really look at. So you want to study that because there are those people that put too much emphasis on relationships. Okay. And I know that we all know people like that. A good example would be, and I'm using women because they tend to be more guilty of this than men, although I think there are men that are guilty of it as well, but they don't do anything without their partner. And that's good and not good, but I think it's not good on an individual level because I think that charts, which do revolve around us as individuals, but it does encompass, as I've said many times, other people's in our lives. But, when you get into a situation where you're very dependent on partnerships, you do have to look at whether or not it's an enabling factor. And then you have to question whether or not that person has an independence issue. And a lot of times you're going to find they do. They might have abandonment issues. They might have issues that are stemming from the childhood. Look for psyche. So what happens when you look at a chart? Here we are, we're talking about relationships, but already I'm bringing up concept of a relationship when I bring up enabling. So what happens when you begin to look in the axis, and I've talked about the axis many times, and that's at 2230 mark on a dial, and how they're literally, when we do anything in a chart, you want to look at all four corners of it. You want to look at all of conversations that revolve around it. And one of the ways in which you would do that is you go into Juno, and then you would be able to figure out mathematically what are the other areas of the chart using that 2230, that math that I do very frequently. I did it with the diurnals again, that will then help you design how to set this up within your own chart. So you want to do that for Hera. You want to do it for Juno. And you also want to do it for an asteroid. If you're familiar and if you use a lot of asteroids, there's an asteroid called Bano. Now, Bano is more, in my opinion, related to significant others. Whereas Juno, I know it sounds like Juno would be revolving around significant others, but I'll be really honest with you. If you have a really strong Juno relationship, and I'll explain to you what that means later, like, how do you mean it's strong? For example, I once was in a relationship with somebody who was really connected to my Juno, and I believe I was connected to his Juno. We never got married. We could never even live together. We did have a long relationship, over 7 years. We tried to live together, but there's something about Juno that also represents, quote unquote, the lover. Now, and I'll get to this when we get to my visual here. In the charts, the lover is the 5th house and the partner is the 7th house. Juno represents a lot about our partnerships and what we look for in a person. But a really strong connection to Juno might make that person a lover and not necessarily a partner. I know I'm probably confusing a lot of people right now. Again, if you have Juno on the ascendant or Juno on the sun, maybe even Juno on the descendant, you might not really understand what I'm saying because to you, Juno and Hera, whatever they represent, you can see that in partnerships, okay? But I don't have one. I have one on an angle. Juno for me is on the IC. But I can honestly tell you that I've had a really Juno relationship and it didn't go that far. For me, I don't do short term, so you're probably thinking 7 years was pretty long. No, actually, it was one of my shorter relationships. When somebody was married to somebody 20 years, and I'm with this person I'm with now 14. So obviously, 7 years was pretty short. A memorable and important relationship in my life. I don't want to discount it. But it was a Juno relationship, and there is a distinction. Now, that was the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing I want to talk about is you can also look at your marriage in your chart by looking at the midpoint between Cupido and Kronos. Okay, so Cupido is the family, it's the art, the social life. It's like Venus on steroids, right? And then Kronos would be officiating that situation, would make it official, and that would be marriage. So if you're looking to see if you'll ever get married, or if you want to know maybe even about the marriage, or maybe even the person, you could probably go into the Cupido Kronos midpoint, and you could probably find out a lot about that. Okay. Now, the Venus, which is the last thing I want to talk about before I pull up this visual. Venus is our social life. I know, it's so confusing. It's also our love, or how we love. It's also our money, okay? But Venus can be another way to really study our love relationships, or even what we're like in love, or whom we might like or love. Okay. And here again, I don't like to just use my own, but I do have an 11th house, and I have to be friends with that person. So not everybody, some people can be just be a partner with that person. Maybe they have their own separate lives and everything. So it would be determined by the aspects of Venus and where Venus was placed in the chart. Once again, it would be very advisable for particularly people like me who are asteroid students to go in there, pull up the 4 mathematical points that would be used for that particular planet, and find out what asteroids are accompanying that planet. In this case, it would be Venus. Okay? I think you could learn a lot by even looking at just Cupido, but Venus in particular is a good player. I think that we have to also discern that you could find out about love relationships or love partnerships if you are somebody who's willing to work with the asteroids by combining Venus with Hera, Juno, Bano. Find the midpoint. What are you going to learn from that midpoint? Midpoints are very important in this kind of work. One of the books I was researching with, and before I get to my, I do want to talk about the books. There are many. Once upon a time, I was considered quite an authority as an astrologer on this. And I'm going to be really honest with you. I loved doing the Synastry composite work that I've done, but it is very hard when you look at a Synastry or a composite and you know that there's difficulties and that the relationship may not live long because of those difficulties. Okay. And I definitely, when I decided to do this video, I did talk to someone about it, and I have to admit, I saw a lot of failed relationships. So if you're getting into this line of work, it's not all good news. And I will be honest with you, it's almost more bad news than good news because of the transits that we undergo ourselves. And a big one would be Neptune transits, okay? People get hit Neptune, Venus, they fall madly in love. Okay, madly in love. But depending on how each of their Venus and Neptunes are affected, that love is going to be so disappointing. And then you're going to look back and you're going to say to yourself, maybe a year later, 2 years later, what was I thinking? Okay. Well, I've had people that actually paid to have work done during such aspects such as this, or Venus Uranus. That's another one. You just fall in love so suddenly, right? But so suddenly it can end. So this is like when I would do my thing, and then I would have to really share some really bad news. And I have to be honest with you, as much as I enjoyed that work and I was very successful at it, and I still do it, okay? But not as much as I was. Also, I'm older, so are my friends, okay? But we all look at things differently. But I will say this, that you have to be prepared to deliver bad news, okay? I don't know, what makes a relationship is really complicated, and we're going to get into that. But let's look at some of the books. Okay, so mind my reach here. A couple of books that I do recommend. Here, oh boy, and there's so many. So many. so many. Okay. Wow. I have two of those. Okay. I've been doing astrology a really long time, and I have developed quite the library. And as a matter of fact, I've had to thin the library out several times. One of them recently because of changing my office. But I keep some of the things that are sacred to me. And these things that I'm going to show you, these are sacred things, okay? They're old. So I'm going to warn you, I don't even know if you can find all these books. Used, I would go with used first. I know that there are thriftbooks.com. There's a couple of different places I'd probably check first. But Planets and Composite by Robert Hand. Oh, valuable too. These are like cookbooks too. So I don't really use cookbooks anymore. I did when I started. I've been doing astrology for decades, but I will still go back and look. It's amazing. Sometimes I go, I want to check what they say on this. And I do that all the time, even with a tarot reading. So there's one. And I'm even bringing them up in order. Here's two. All right. Now, I want to point out that this book is done differently. The math is done differently. When you look at Composite, that is combining charts. That's using midpoints of charts. That's what that is. But he's doing charts for anybody, business, and two people on the street, right? That's what he's doing. Anything. John Townley is doing them for love. It's really different. I thought it was good. I was a little impressed. I don't know that I was all that impressed. I mean, I definitely own the book and I'm keeping it. So, but definitely worth looking at if you're interested in this kind of work. Now we get into something I really love. It's called Synastry. And I do both. Okay, so if you were to hire me, and it costs money, to do this, but say you hired someone like me to do this. Generally speaking, when I do this work, and I think I speak for other astrologers, but maybe not. I don't know. I do both. I will look at this chart, and sometimes I'll even take the time to do both of the composites, because this will be two different charts, by the way, guys, because the way John does it is different than the way Robert Hand does it. Okay? And they know each other. I think he talks about Robert Hand. Okay? So this is a midpoint theory. Midpoint theories were developed by Ebertine. I do a lot of midpoints because there's a whole book on cosmobiology where I do a lot of it for the trans-Neptunians. It was the way I got to learn them. And that's what these are all based on, midpoints. Okay? These are based on taking one person's chart and then comparing it to another person's chart. So when you're looking at planets in love or you're looking at planets in composite, you're creating what we would like to refer to as a third entity. You're a completely different chart, okay? Because, and I'm going to say this, I've lived a long time and I have been, it's a joke, but I am known as a relationship expert, which is hilarious, okay? But a lot of my people, that's what they would say. And I'm going to tell you, you got to look at everything when it comes to relationships, okay? You really do. And if you have to, the more you have to do, the more detail that you're going to acquire from those books. The Synastry chart is by a man by the name of Ronald Davison, and actually it's one of the newest ones that I've acquired, and I thought that was pretty good. Okay, actually it was given to me, so I don't know if it's still available. It is one of my newer ones, though. Okay, I don't know if any of these are still available. Here's the one I really started off using. So Sakian and Acker, if I'm saying it correctly. It is a relationship book, and you can see it's a cookbook. So, and you can tell by the look of it. It's yellowed. It's hard. I've used it hard. Oh, I have a paperback of this too. So this isn't even my only copy, but it tells you like A's, moon, squares, B's, Saturn, and so it's a cookbook, and it's really fun. And if you're just starting out, I really recommend these things. I did this all in the beginning. Now, I've been an astrologer for over 40 years, so obviously I'm not really using cookbooks as much anymore, but I love them, and I still will refer back to them from time to time, okay? I think that when we do look at these books and when we look at the charts, we also have to look at the fact that people are very, very complicated. Okay. And I have a saying about relationships, and this is just funny because, I'm this person who does relationship stuff. And by the way, I was quite the matchmaker, even as a person in high school. And I was already using astrology because I've been studying astrology for so long. So I've been out of high school. So maybe I've been doing this longer than 40 years. I don't even want to get into that. But I think about how I have a saying because I've been doing this work for so long. And my saying is that no human being is perfect and that no couple is perfect. There's no such thing as the perfect couple. There really isn't. What we do have is we have flawed human beings. We have people who have issues. And the trick is that in order to make a relationship work, you just have to hope that the issues of one person does not buck up against the issues of another person. That would cause a combustion that would end the relationship. That when we get together with people that and we begin to accept them as partners, we have to accept them for who they are, and this vice versa. And that's where it comes down to, well, if this person has this issue, I just can't deal with that. It happens. And maybe you can't. And that's just something that's going to be in the astrology. And that's just the way it is. And that's the sad part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a chart at this point, and I'm going to look at this chart. It's empty, by the way. It's a fake chart. I really have a thing about using real charts, okay? I do need to get over that. And maybe what I need to do is start bringing up charts of dead people. And I have really considered it. I'm working on a dead couple right now for my rectification. And they were married forever and ever and ever. And it might not have been a bad relationship to show. And it is a possibility that I would do a part 2 and I would kind of show examples, okay? But realize that even if I show you an example, it's not going to look anything like yours. And that's the best thing I can tell you, that each story of all the work that I've done in the past, everything I've done to lead me to this point, I can tell you that there are no two situations that were even similar. So even if we do go into greater detail, and I might do that, it just won't be the same. Okay, I can tell you that right now. I think that other factors, and I'll get into this more when I do the Hellenistic astrology, but we live in ages, and we're in an age now where marriage is not what it was, and relationships do not have the same, they don't have the same contract. We get married for different reasons than we used to. More now, it's more emotional. More now, it's more free will. But that some marriages were arranged, okay, which really freaks me out. But, you still hear of it in certain places in the world and even in this country, which I find appalling. But that's me. So again, it would depend on what the astrology chart said, and that's what you have to go by. So let me pull up now a blank chart so I can show you the differences between the fifth and the seventh house and what it is that we would look at. So I'm back. I think it's this camera. Wow, this is where I get a little messed up. But anyway, I think it is this camera. Basically, what I'm looking at here is, and you notice I circled descendant, okay? Because descendant is, this is your other, like you have your ascendant, your rising, your surroundings. The descendant is the crowning point for partners, okay? Whereas if you see down here in the fifth house, I put house of affairs, lovers. Okay. Somebody has a really full fifth house and not maybe so much going on in the seventh house. They might be somebody who is in love with the idea of being in love and literally might have multiple relationships or partners. Doesn't mean they're a cheater. There's other things that we can see that. Okay, and I'll talk about some of those things. That's why I think this might be a two-part series, because I think I don't even know if I'm going to get to the difference between Synastry and Composite at this point. But, I mean, other than explaining it as I did in the beginning. So here I am, and I'm talking about a house of partners and a house of affairs. And probably a lot of you are thinking, well, geez, what's the difference? An affair is an expression of, it's like now it's like, I've got the groundwork to who I am. I know who I am. And now I want to just go out there and I just want to have an affair. I just want to have a partner that is somebody I can go out with, or that I can have sex with, or I can, an affair is different than a partner, because there's not necessarily the same kind of commitment. Okay, because I think of an affair as kind of as an expression or a way. Think about what else is that. That house is that house of children. And if you're an artist, that might be where you would look for your art, the products of your art, the products of your children. Well, love affairs are a product of our own making in many ways. Okay. Because the objective in an affair is more about being in love and all of that. But hey, well, what happens is that maybe that doesn't really go to this. Does everyone follow that? That the person you're having sex with, you really can't see them being, the person that you share other things with, like your home. Okay, your car, your bills. I go on and on and on. Okay, just a review. I am is the first house. I own is the second house. I think, communicate, think, siblings. Okay, this is my home, my roots, my base. This is my children and my way of expressing myself. Do you understand that? Love. I'm expressing myself through having an affair. Then you have the house of work and service. Then you have partnerships. So you see that partnerships entail an incredible amount more responsibility. There's that give and take. We're only giving and taking, well, body fluids. Okay? Here in the eighth house is combined resources, because once you have a partnership, you have responsibilities and you can accumulate resources. The ninth house, sometimes called the house of change, is also the house where you are like the different you, because now you're not just I think, because it was only you. It was only your I own. But now it's we own. So this, I think, is a bigger picture. Does that make sense? Hopefully. So it is a house of change too, because as soon as you start introducing another element or another person into a situation, it changes. Okay? And then it's the house of I am, or I am in terms of the world. I deliver to the world. I bring to the world. And as a result, instead of having expression of self-expression, you now have expression that happens as a group, or as, in this case, maybe even two individuals in conjunction. And that it does make the spiritual house the 12th house, or the house of hidden enemies. Okay. By the way, just anyone who saw the diurnal chart, remember that I said I'm coming into Mercury hitting my 12th house cusp. I knew that was going to be really important. Both Aquarius, I'm an Aquarius. It was really, really significant. Yeah, I was hacked. The house of secret enemies. I was hacked. Okay. Not that that's funny. It wasn't funny. Okay. It was a couple days of a nuisance. I changed a lot of passwords. But this is the house of hidden enemies. I don't know who the hacker was. I'll never know. It was a bot. I'm sure it was a bot. So, house of hidden enemies. I just had to throw that in there just in case anyone saw that. Okay. Now, and if you haven't seen it, go see it. If you're interested in diurnals or erecting diurnals, go see it. And now you know what happened to me when Mercury crossed there. Okay. So, the thing I want to talk about as the reason why we went around this whole wheel is because, and I said this in diurnals, and I'm going to say it here because I think it's really important. When you're looking at the house, you're looking at all the planets in the houses. Okay. So I would look at everything that's in my 5th house. I would look at everything that's in my 7th house, providing you have something there. If you don't, then you go to phase 2, because phase 1 is always look for what falls there. Maybe look at the axis points. Here we go again with that 2230, 2230, 22. Find your 4 points. Read what shows up. Okay. But what's also going to be equally important here, and I left it on purpose, is the cusp of the house, because it rules. That house is ruled by whatever that is. So in this case, Mercury rules the house of affairs. This is an imaginary person, but I would wonder if they weren't more attracted to younger people. Mercury. So then, of course, you would go and you would look at Mercury and all of its aspects. But here's another thing. And I loved that this ended up like this. I did not plan it. But sometimes, and I have to admit that when I decided to do a video today, I meditated. And what came to my head, because I have 2 big projects going on that are probably going to be multiple lectures. One on Hellenistic astrology and one on rectifications of the chart. Each is going to take me a while to gather up and then start to set up and formulate the lectures. The relationship chart is easy for me because I've done so many, just like the diurnals. So I'm starting with things that I know. But I will tell you that this is an intercepted house. And what intercepts? This is Venus has been intercepted. Libra has been intercepted in this house. This love affair house that's ruled by Mercury and sucked up. Okay, so I think this person would have a lot to learn about love affairs, maybe related to, it could even be online. This is somebody who's going to have to learn lessons before they could really understand the concepts of love. Because love is intercepted. So there's going to be lessons prior to the actual learning of the lesson about love. And those lessons would involve the Mercury. And I didn't leave any of this up because this was just like when you're doing a chart like this, I just put now. So this was sometime this morning. Okay. With that said, I'm going to do the same thing with my 7th house cusp. All right. And that 7th house cusp ruler is Jupiter. Jupiter's kind of spiritual too. So there's going to be more of a spiritual flair to this. There's going to be a lot of humor in this partnership. This is a partnership that could be beneficial to this individual because of Jupiter, depending on how Jupiter is going to be aspected in that chart. Okay? So, and I don't have Jupiter in the chart. Jupiter, I can tell you, is in Pisces, probably not in good aspects to this particular point because it's squaring things in this area. Not by a big degree, I mean, by a larger expanse. But, here again, you want to look for things like that. You want to look at what's going on in the skies. How am I being aspected? Is this a good time for me to meet somebody? Or am I still learning the lessons of the 5th house because of the interception of Venus? So just because somebody's charming and witty doesn't, and very detail oriented and all the wonderful things that's coming from that Mercury doesn't necessarily equate to love. Love is a learned lesson in that house. So not saying this fictitious person couldn't fall in love. No, I think they could. I just don't think it's going to happen when they're real young. I just don't think this is going to be somebody who meets somebody when they're in childhood and then that's the person they end up with. Oh, no. You can see that in a chart. Somebody has a son out of Mitos. They're probably only going to be married once and it's going to be the same person. But I think, that they've been with or whatever. That's another thing to look for in a chart. And there's a lot of things to look for when you're talking about charts. And I do believe that if we look at midpoints of Venus, we can understand a lot more. If we look at the midpoints of Hera, we could understand more. And if we look at the midpoints of Juno, Bano, and all of them, I think that we could learn a lot more. For example, if you're a woman and you wanted to know about the man, then you would use the sun as the other side of the midpoint factor. And midpoints are really easy. I think I've done a lot of I think I've done at least 2 videos on them where it's mathematical and you would equate each planet to its mathematical point, add them up, divide them by 2. That simple. And I think that looking at that point in a chart would tell you an awful lot about those 2 particular factors. Astrology is a great subject, but believe me, you could really get snowed under in research, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing relationships right now and still working on 2 other subject matters. So the very last thing, and I think I am going to save a lot of this for another lecture, okay? And that is, I do want to talk just very briefly about Synastry and Composite. I know I started, but I jumped right back into the individual charts, which I think are really, really important. Okay? So let me put this on hold. I'm going to pull up something else, and I'm going to show you some stuff. Okay, so I figure very quickly before we leave, I would show you at least how to do a synastry. Okay, so what I did, and I didn't use real people as always, but I used 2 days in a row. And basically what you're doing, okay, and let's see if I can just do this because sometimes it doesn't work. I took 2 days. I go up to, and by the way, Janice has the same thing, where you go up and you go to the drop-down menus and you want to look at a bi-wheel. So then you pull it up you put whoever you want on the inside, which will really use their chart, and you could switch people. So look at it one way, then swap, use the other chart inside. But then what you're doing is you're looking at two charts. Now, obviously, I'm looking at things that are going to have all kinds of conjunctions because I did two charts for 2 different days and they were side by side. But it gives you an idea that now you can compare Junos. Now you can compare moons. Now you can compare suns. And this is really good because remember when I pointed out, and I was in Sakian and Acker's book of human astrology, the astrology of human relationships. Okay. I used this book for 100 years and I can't remember the title. But this book actually will say to you, okay, so if I'm using the inner chart, okay, so the inner chart is, say, February 26th, but we'll say it's John Doe. So we're using John Doe's chart. Basically, it's going to be his rising, his midheaven, his descendant. Okay. And then what I would do is I'd go around and I'd look for the sun and Mars and the moon. And I would start, where do they fall in his chart? What house? Okay. So the outer wheel is showing me what house it falls in his chart. Yeah. And then you have a better way of looking at the chart itself to compare the moon to the moon, the sun to the sun, okay? That when you're looking at a bi-wheel, that's what it's called, you're literally able to put these two charts together and really place one inside the other and really examine them. And I think that's a really, really wonderful thing to be able to do. Now, there is also, make sure I can do this. I got to check. Yeah. Okay. There is also the ability to, and I got to find it, combine the two charts right here. Okay. So say I'm going to combine these two charts. And by the way, that would be, here we go, in Solar Fire. And you can see it, making sure you can see it. Yes, you can see it, that I have a choice. I can do Davidson. Okay, that's one. So in other words, you can decide what kind of relationship you want to do. Okay, and I, again, would say, look at several. I think the easiest one to work with is, although I've done relationship Davidson, so I'll be honest with you, I've done both. And I compare them because I think it's really fun to do that. But I would start with the composite midpoints. So, okay, so here I'm going to do this. I'm going to pick both these charts. Okay, so you see how they are? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply, or I'm just going to push OK. I'll have to do a Solar Fire at some point. So here we have a whole new chart based on two charts. And now I could read this chart as if it were any other natal chart. I would actually be able to go in here and I would be able to look at my aspect list for this third person, right? Third person. I mean, it's awesome. Again, I've done a lot of this. This is definitely been one of my products that I've used over the years that I have been able to work with a lot of different people on. And not always does it bring us good news, though. So I always have to warn people about that ahead of time. It is astrology, and they're going to tell you the truth regardless. That's just the way it rolls. So now if I go back, okay, and I'm going to do, and make sure I'm back, because I'm not happy with the way this program's been running lately. I'm going to now go back to my bi-wheel, all right, and I'm going to put the 26th in again, all right, okay. The reports are, look at this, okay, you could do the same, B to chart A. You would distinctly have to know which is chart B and which is chart A, okay, but again, it's charts between each other. But then if you go down, it does the opposite, or does it just Hold on. No, it only does one way. But if you think about it, those charts would be the same. It wouldn't even matter who's A or who's B. Now I think about it, because the B of the chart, one chart's moon is still going to affect the other chart's moon, and it doesn't really matter who's A or who's B. What matters is there's a sextile there, there's a trine there, there's a square there, and that's what you're going to be looking at, and that's what you're going to be reading. So, with that said, I'm going to leave it here. And oops. So I'm back. Sorry about that. I've been having so many problems with the program. Oh, I'm here. I've been having so many problems with this program that I've literally spent so much time just setting things up and then having to reiterate how they are. So I do apologize for those little extra screen snips that we really don't need. But in any event, I'm going to leave this here. I want to thank you for watching the video. First and foremost, I really, really enjoy doing this kind of work. And if you have any questions, please feel free to go to the website at www.divinationcounselingservice.org. I have a message box there. I get the stuff fairly quickly, and I try to get back to people fairly quickly. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. If you have anything you'd like to offer, no more comments, I'd love to hear them. So with that said, probably I will do another video where maybe I'll show some real examples other than, fake examples like I did today. And I'll just search for some dead people, because I think that's the way I feel the most comfortable putting up some charts. So with that said, I hope that this was a good explanation of how to look for relationships in your own natal charts, but also, if you're at all interested, how astrologers read relationship charts. Because I think that's really exciting, to do the relationship chart. And that's probably what I'm going to focus my next lecture on. With that said, until we meet again, as always, I wish you only happy reading.